It's time for Vivid Talk, a coaching conversation to cultivate your visionary lifestyle. I'm your host, Gwen Witherspoon, Better Life Coach. We use my proprietary Vivid model for growth and development to get us started, but it's not a real conversation without you. So join in. Visit vividtalkradio.com for details. We've got a great show for you today. Glad you're here. Welcome to Vivid Talk. I'm Gwen Witherspoon. Today's episode is brought to you by Real Weight Loss and Wellness, and it's a prelude to the new season of Vivid Talk. New co-hosts, new focus, new episodes, all slated for this fall. But before we get started, let me tell you how you can join the conversation. Post your comments, share on social media, visit vividtalkradio.com to start a Coach on Call chat. Welcome to Vivid Talk. I'm your host, Gwen Witherspoon. Today I'm sitting down with grief counselor, founder of Beyond Words, and new author, Stacey Loper. We are going to have a candid conversation about the effects of grief on the visionary. We know that the death of a loved one can leave us shaken for decades, but the loss of a business, a deferred dream, can be just as devastating in ways that may not be apparent. Stacey's going to share with us openly about her own journey and the strategies she uses to help her clients move beyond words to a new outlook on life. This is going to be good.
Progressive brings you Flowetry with Flow.
When Flo flows, she flows in the know. Mind ruminates the rates. Shown them all, I heed the call. Seeing the rest, I choose the best. Sometimes it's ours, sometimes it's not. When the fox walks, is it called a fox trot? That's a real question.
Compare Progressive direct rates with competitors' rates. Visit Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates. Comparison rates not available in all states or situations. Prices vary based on how you buy.
Welcome to Vivid Talk, Stacey. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Gwen, for having me on. It is an honor to be on with you today.
Well, I can't wait to get into this. Our topic today is good grief, what the visionary can learn from loss. But before we get into that, will you introduce yourself to our audience?
Absolutely. I am Stacey Loper. As she said, I'm a grief counselor. I'm the founder of Beyond Words Christian Therapy Bar, and I'm also a new author of the book Total Surrender. I am a wife, I'm a mother, I'm a woman of God before I am anything. And I just allow God to use me in any way that He needs to use me, whether that is speaking to a young lady about puberty and growing up and what to expect out of life coming up, to speaking with the visionary about how grief impacts your life and how you walk throughout that process and what it looks like for you.
I saw in some of your writing, you said life is not about being tired and out of breath, but it's about making every breath count.
Oh, yes, Gwen. We run through life and we say, I'm so busy, I'm tired, but have you been productive? Have you allowed every breath to matter? Has it counted? And if it's counted, what did it count for? See, as a mom, as a wife, as a woman of God, I was truly running through life and I was basically letting the wind take me wherever it wanted to take me. But then I realized that I was so out of breath, but none of those breaths even counted. They didn't even matter because I wasn't impacting. And because I was so tired and so drained, I wasn't being filled back up so that I can pour out what God was putting in me, if that makes any sense.
It does make a whole lot of sense because I think most of us, because we don't have any real clear plan for what we're trying to accomplish in any given day, that's, one of the reasons why we at Vivid Talk Radio, we always talk about getting a vision for every area of life. Because sometimes if you're an entrepreneur, you may have a vision, even if it's foggy. You may have a vision for your business, but then you don't have a vision for your family, or you don't have a vision for your personal life. You don't have a vision for other aspects of your life. And so what happens then is we get tossed kind of to and fro by everything, and we're not paying attention to how we're spending our time every day. So I can see where it would be very easy then just to get caught up. Then those breaths don't seem like they matter because you don't know where you're going.
And that's exactly it, Gwen. That's exactly what happens to all of us. Even though the vision isn't clear and we have it, we know it's there, we got a passion for it, we want to do it. But is it time for us to do it? Is it that season for us to do it? Or is God still working on something in us? And what is He trying to teach me at this point in my life so that He can take me to the next point in my life? So, yeah, it's very clear that some things, we see, but we can't exactly see what that is because that view is so distorted. And so we look and we try to find what it is, that thing that I'm looking at, but I it's not in focus just yet. And so that means that we still have to walk through some things so that we can get closer to it, and then it becomes a view that we can actually see what that is.
When I started thinking about grief in general, I remembered that I'm always hearing about these stages of grief. Can you talk some about that? What are the stages of grief? How can you tell if you or someone you know is grieving?
Okay, and that's where a lot of people really get to a point to where they're misinformed. Grief is
Yeah.
actually it's not a
Yeah.
stage. It's really not a
Yeah.
stage that you go through because the way I walk through grief or the way I grieve is not going to be the way you grieve. I mean, I may not go
Mhm.
through that stage that they say is denial, that's
Right.
anger, that's acceptance, that's depression. I may not go through any of those stages to get to acceptance, but I may go through an emotional roller coaster where one day I
Mhm.
feel this way and the next day I feel totally different than I felt 2 days ago. So it's not necessarily that we go through stages, it's we go through a process of, do we have a listening ear? Do we have someone that is going to cry with us? And how you identify if someone is going through grief is, what do their words say? And sometimes you have to read between the lines because they're not going to exactly tell you how they feel, but you can tell it in their tone, you can tell it in their body language, you can tell it when they shun you off because they just don't want to be bothered. They begin to isolate, they become angry because they don't know how to facilitate the emotions that they're walking through. So when most people look at grief, when to be honest with you, they look at it from a perspective of death, but that's not all grief is. Grief is more
Mhm.
than that. Grief is a divorce. It's a relationship that didn't end up in marriage. It's an abortion that you experienced when you were 16 years old because you had to save face for your family and you're still
Yeah.
walking through those emotions because your mom made you have an abortion. It's all
Yeah.
of that. It's a rape or a molestation that happened to you by a brother, an uncle, a family friend, or somebody you knew or did not know. So you
Yeah.
grieve all of that. Grief is it's a normal part of life, and that's what most people don't understand. It's how you walk through the grief that you begin to experience the different emotions and whether those emotions will bring a bad experience to your life.
You bring up a really interesting point. So, really, we could almost describe grief as really it's just a baggage that we're carrying, and that we because we've other my other co-hosts and I we've talked about trauma, just the trauma, and how your body responds to that and how you emotionally deal with it. And and as you talk, you're reminding me of those conversations. It's really whatever, any trauma, any major life change, anything that has just kind of shaken you in some way, we grieve over that.
That's exactly what it is. It's those life changing experiences, those things that we identify as a loss of a business, a loss of a relationship, a loss of a child, a loss of a loved one, a loss of finances, even a gain of finances because some people don't know how to deal with that. It's
Right.
anything that you directly connect to a life or something that completely transforms your life can be a part of grief.
Okay, now you sound like somebody who knows what she's talking about.
Oh, yes, I have walked through grief in several different aspects of my life, from losing my brother when I was 8 months pregnant to my husband completely losing his lawn care service, us almost losing our home, having to come bring our children home uh to darkness because our lights got cut off because we're trying to walk through this process of my
Okay, now you
husband.
go. Wait, now, wait. Now you gonna have to slow down. Okay. Okay, can you give us one at a time? Like, it's traumatic listening.
Oh yeah, it can be traumatic.
Ooh, honey. Yes.
Yes. So
So,
when
what
we
about your brother? What happened to your brother?
my brother was shot and killed 5 years ago in a home invasion. Someone broke into his home and shot and killed him. And it's funny how my grieving process looks for me as opposed to how someone else would have experienced it. I'm 8 months pregnant. I'm visiting my mother along with my husband and my children in Meridian, Mississippi. And at 1 o'clock in the morning, my little brother dashes through the door and he's screaming, "They shot my brother! They shot my brother! Where's my mom?" I am in the midst of some really good sleep. And I wake up and I'm like,
Oh,
okay, you need to calm down. I mean, I really was. It was
yeah.
good. 8 months pregnant, I was
Yes.
good. So
Yes.
I wake up and I'm like, you gotta calm down. What are you saying? In the middle of my mom's kitchen, he says, "They shot my brother. Go get my mom." And he storms out the door. My brother had been shot about 75 miles in Jackson, Mississippi. So my little brother had his friend dash him to Jackson, Mississippi so that he could get to the crime scene. I was left 8 months pregnant in the middle of my mom's kitchen with my husband standing behind me. And I truly thought that I would go into shock. My husband would have to rush me to the hospital because I'm going into labor. But Gwen, that's not how that happened for me. I became numb. It seemed like for 30 minutes, but it was only for like a minute or so that God could truly download on me what was about to happen. And
Mhm.
then the process kicked in. It was like I knew exactly what to do. I knew exactly what to say. I had to get my mom from work. I couldn't tell her at work what was going on. I just needed her to come with me. So
Yeah.
when I got to
Yeah.
her job, I just told her to come with me, that something had happened to my brother, but I just need you to come home. And at 8 months pregnant, I had to stand in my mom's driveway and tell her that her son had been shot. But not only that he had been shot,
Mhm.
that they pronounced him dead on the scene. It was in that moment that I did not know what was going on inside of me, that I had an extraordinary peace about myself. It wasn't until months down the line, Gwen, that I realized that that was God's peace surrounding me. So my mom tells me, she says, "I did not know that you had such a sense of humor." She says, because throughout the entire week of us planning his funeral, you going to see his body, she said, you didn't cry. She says, you kept an open mind and you had such a peace about you that I've never been able to experience. And I knew that it was nothing but God that completely took over my body to allow me to have that type of experience and for my family to experience a peace that surpasses all understanding. So when we talk about grief, there are so many different ways to handle grief. Now, did I cry? I did. I remember crying over my brother and about his death on my way back to Memphis, Tennessee that next Sunday morning. And I heard the song, "Praise is what I do."
Mhm.
I will never forget that because in the good and in the bad, praise is what I do. Because I knew that God was doing something so much more in my brother's death than what we could see with our human eye. And that's how I had to walk through my process of grief. God showed me what it was you were doing. And God truly spoke to me and He says, "I was unifying your family. And now my family has a unity that we've never experienced in the 40 years that I've been here on."
So you're telling me then that was the light at the end of the tunnel. That was the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, right? In the middle of this really horrible situation was what the unity that your family gained in the middle of it all.
That was the beauty in our brokenness,
Yeah.
Gwen.
Yeah.
That was really
Yeah.
the broken because I didn't have a great relationship with my brother. Over the past 18 years of my life, I had only spoken to him and seen him maybe 10 times. We
Mhm.
never had a great relationship, but our kids know each other and they are spread across the United States. but they know each other. They have a relationship with each other. My mother and I are closer. Me and my siblings are much closer. We all have
Hmm.
these relationships that we didn't have prior to him being killed. And so for us, that was the beauty in our brokenness when it came to experiencing death in our family.
We're going to take a commercial break. And when we return, we'll continue our conversation with grief counselor Stacy Loper. Sorry I'm late, but I was coming from a doctor's appointment.
What doctor? Are you okay?
Oh, yeah, just Real Weight Loss and Wellness. It's a new medical weight loss practice.
I was just about to say, I've never seen you look better. What's the secret?
It's real. My best friend turned me on to it. She was concerned after I really packed on the pounds when Mom passed.
Please tell me you are not on one of those fad diets.
Nah, in fact, Real Weight Loss and Wellness creates personalized programs with step-by-step guidance from a medical doctor. Dr. Jada takes the guesswork out, makes it simple, and I learned that losing weight doesn't have to be hard. And no excuses. I can even do my appointments virtually.
Well, you might be inspiring your big brother to do something about this dad bod.
Listen, safe, affordable weight loss is Dr. Jada's specialty. I've done so well that I'm about to schedule free consultations for my husband and my teenager.
What's the number? I better schedule mine too.
404-464-8749.
Wait, slow down.
Just visit the website, startwithreal.com. Welcome back to Vivid Talk. I'm your host, Gwen Witherspoon, and we're returning for the second half of my conversation with grief counselor Stacy Loper. Now, you talk about other forms of grief, other things that people grieve over, and you mentioned that a little bit in the beginning, just about the fact that really any kind of loss. How do you walk people through how they deal with that?
You know how you're teaching a child how to walk. You hold their hand, you talk to them, you help them navigate putting one foot in front of the other, in front of the other. And that's the same way you help people walk through their grieving experience. When you grieve a loss, whether it's a business, it's the loss of a loved one, it's a divorce, what you have to be conscious of is where that person is in their walk. Are they angry? Are they to a point to where they just want to lash out at everyone because the frustration is so heavy for them that they just don't know what to do? They don't want to hear you. They're trying to isolate themselves because they don't want to be in your presence because you don't understand and you keep judging them. People don't
Yeah.
want to be judged when they're walking through their grief and how long it's taken them to walk through it. So you have to be very intentional about meeting them right where they are in their grieving experience. And if it takes them 6 months to come and sit in your office and cry, then you watch them cry for 6 months. You allow them to talk through the pain. You allow them to talk through the energy that they do have, even if it's very little energy. You allow them to do that. You give them hope by giving them different exercises to do, like writing a letter to the loved one of something that they might not have said while that person was alive, or any pain that they may have experienced with that loved one. What do you want to tell them about that pain that they left behind that you all never got an opportunity to talk about? Sometimes it just takes for them to sit here and read that letter to you as if they were talking to that person. But say they lost a business. They lost something that they thought was the very thing they needed to be validated. Because when you're looking at it from a visionary perspective, Gwen, people began to feel like failures. They feel less than. And feeling less
Yeah.
than can be so traumatic because then you say, people are not going to believe in me when I try something that I have to do next.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
when you're walking through people from that perspective, from a visionary perspective, because they're coming up with something next, okay?
Yeah. Right.
Who are you looking to buy into that vision that you have? Are you looking for family and friends to buy into that vision? Or are you focused on, is this the season that God is birthing this particular vision out of you? And that's when I feel like people began to put it into perspective because they say, Stacey, you know what? I didn't look at it in that light. I didn't look at it as though, is this what God wants to birth out of me now? Or is he still working some things out in me so that I can produce this fruit a little bit later? And so when you began to put those things into perspective, you began to connect, to have this intimate and deeper relationship with God so that you can be impactful and so that you can be in plan and purpose and in the will of God. And so that's how I utilize grief recovery when it comes to a visionary perspective. Because we lose sight of it because we want to do this and we want to do that, and it's just not the time for it because God says, nope, not this season. This is what I need you working on here, and you well on the other side. You got to reel that back in and say, okay, God, what is it that you have for me? What is it in this season that you need me to be doing? Who is it that you need me to impact?
Even as you're talking, I think about too, sometimes we don't understand the residue of a loss. Like we don't understand. Like maybe they do. We do move forward to that next project, but we're almost, you know how you're tentative because you remember when you did it the last time there may have been a negative outcome, but we don't necessarily even recognize that we are making decisions and operating based on that old stuff, based on that old loss.
Yes.
And so it's how do you help someone recognize like really where they are?
So how I take them through that process, Gwen, is I sit down and say, okay, what did you do wrong? What did you do right?
Hmm.
And so when we began to look at what was done right and what was done wrong, if you did something wrong and if you felt like a failure, why did you feel like a failure? And
Hmm.
as we split that piece of paper in half and we walk through, okay, this was done right. This is everything that I did. I did the business plan. I put everything in place. I might have had the finances to do all of this, and now I don't have the finances to move forward. When it's just like carrying baggage from one relationship
Hmm.
to the next relationship to the next relationship. That's the exact same thing you're doing when you bring all of this old baggage from the first thing that failed to the next thing that you're trying to build over here. You have got to leave that mentality right where it is. Okay, I failed here. So let's look at what we need to do different. Okay, because what I did over here is not going to work over here because this did not work. It's one in the same when you are walking through that process. You say, okay, I'm starting brand new. I'm starting from the ground up. My bank account may not look like I need it to look like, but God is not looking at your bank account when He is birthing something out of you.
Yeah.
We truly got to get in the will of God, and we have to have a yielding, and we have to yield our will to the will of God. And I think that's the most important thing that I make my clients understand is what is God's will for you? What is the purpose? And you got to tap into that if you don't know what that looks like. Are you under a covering? Who's covering you? What ministry are you grounded and rooted in that's going to help build you up in that place to where he says, this is what I need you to do.
You mentioned that your husband went through a challenge with a real estate business. Tell us some more about that and how he got through it.
Okay, so my at the age of 22 when my husband owned his first home. So I didn't know my husband then. I didn't meet him until he was 24.
Hmm.
By that time, but from the age of 4, my husband owned 6 rental properties here in Memphis, Tennessee. And they were really going well. The real estate market was booming. I mean, and he was making a lot of money, Gwen. To be
Yeah.
24 years old, he was really making money. So he got into the process, and I think it was 2008 is when the real estate market kind of just took a downfall. It just
Yeah.
took a downward spiral. And my husband was left, he was also in the military, but my husband was left with this huge balance on these houses. I mean, like a total of $400,000 in debt on houses
Oh
alone.
no.
Yes.
Wow.
Mm. And it devastated him. It devastated him. So between 2002, no, between the age of 22 to the age of about 26, my husband was really doing well. He was okay. But then when he saw that those rental properties were not in a place to be filled all the time, he was losing money because he still had mortgages on them. And having to get them up and running and being in a good space, my husband was like, dang, I'm losing a lot of money. And when we sat down before a bankruptcy attorney, the attorney was just honest with him, and he says, "You're going to have to file bankruptcy because you don't have, even with your wife's income, you don't have enough to cover any of this, and you're going to find yourself in a deeper hole than where you are right now." And that, I mean, that devastated my husband because he's like, "I'm the breadwinner. I'm supposed to do this. I'm supposed to do
Yeah.
that." And he also had a full-time job. So then not just real estate, but he was also in the lawn care and landscaping business. And for a while that really worked. And when the market fell, the lawn care and landscaping kind of picked up for him and he was doing really well in that. And this was after he filed bankruptcy. So he really took to the lawn care and landscaping. Well, it was doing well, and my husband said, "Honey, I think it's time for me to step out there and just do this full time." I said, "Okay, honey, I support you 100." Well, he did that, and 2 years after coming off his job, we were in a space to where our home was about to go in foreclosure, and our kids had to come home to the lights being off, not once, not twice,
Mm. Oh,
three
no.
times.
Wow.
Can you imagine what that did to my husband? He felt like such a failure.
Yeah.
He
I can
he
see it. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, he didn't know which way to go. And all he could continue to do, Gwen, was say, "Baby, I'm sorry."
Mm.
And what I had to do as a wife, and knowing that my husband was grieving this huge loss for him and for his family, was I had to continue to tell him, "Honey, despite it all, I love you and we're going to be okay." What that did for my husband was more than me putting a $20,000 check in his hand and telling him, "Baby, go do what you need to do with it."
Mm-hmm.
It was the fact of my words and that I understood where he was as an individual and allowing him to understand, "Baby, it's going to be okay. I need you to see the light. I need you to see the light at the end of the tunnel." Because he wasn't. All he was seeing was the darkness. And he was tapping into God's word for him. But there was a point where, Gwen, when I kept telling him, "Baby, this is not the season for you to do the landscaping. It's not the season for you to do the landscaping." My husband wasn't tuning into that aspect. And he was like, "No, this is what I want to do. I know that this is for us." And when all of this happened, he later came back and said, "I'm sorry I didn't listen." And I told him, "No, it's not an issue that you didn't listen. We live and we learn."
I think we all have to learn that life has all these ebbs and flows to it. It's not always going to be always good, and it's not always going to be all terrible. And it is learning to manage those emotions when we feel like we have lost. Sounds like too what's super important is you just got to have you have to have people in your corner, and you can't be afraid to talk to them and reach out to them and open your heart to them. And then you just got to be patient with yourself while you're going through the process.
Absolutely, Gwen, you said it.
So before we go, tell us about your book and the offer you have for our audience.
This book is for everybody. They'll get a free tank top with the purchase of their book. They can find it at stacyloper.com.
Thank you so much for being on Vivid Talk Radio, Stacy.
It has been a pleasure.
Thanks for listening to Vivid Talk Radio, a coaching conversation for visionaries. A special thanks to our sponsor, Real Weight Loss and Wellness. Visit vividtalkradio.com and read our blog on today's topic. Join the conversation by speaking your mind, posting your comments, sharing in social media, and tagging at Vivid Brands. You've been listening to Vivid Talk Radio with Gwen Witherspoon. Join us each Wednesday at 5 p.m. and get vision for every area of life. Visit vividtalkradio.com for more. Until next time, make it vivid.